sure I start the streaming. Just because you see OBS doesn't mean it is starting to stream. So it may be a good idea to check, is it saying it is streaming? And the bottom of the screen has a little green light. It shows whether it is actually uploading stuff to the server or not. So right now it's good. Okay, we are uploading stuff to the YouTube server. And if you really want to double check, you go to YouTube, go to my channel, and then you try to watch the stream as it is being streamed. So if you can see that and hear that over YouTube, that means it's definitely working, right? Okay. All right, so next we're going to start up the browser, and we'll go back to the homework assignment, and then we'll try to take a look at the homework assignment. And I'm just going to read everything off of the assignment itself. Oh, this is the wrong stuff. Wrong canvas. I used to teach mobile development. So I have some of, so the browser has kept some of the cached search items because of that. I understand some of you may be teaching, taking a class from another campus on mobile programming. Yeah.
Class is hard.
Is it mobile programming 1 or 2?
I'm not sure. It's 308. The subject's hard, not the class, but the
okay, if it's 308, it is not the mobile programming class that I'm talking about. 363 is mobile programming 1, and then 364 is mobile programming 2. So those are the twos that I usually teach over here, but since I didn't get enough students in that class got canceled.
I was having trouble looking at the difference between a fluid grid and a table. They keep trying to steer you away from using tables. I'm always tables, and it's like...
Well, do you know why they're trying to steer you away from using tables?
I haven't figured that out.
Accessibility.
Yeah.
Yep. So because of accessibility, tables are terrible for accessibility. But if you use CSS, to do the same visual layout, the underneath organization is not a table. It's not organized by rows and columns. So to a screen reader, it is actually a lot easier to read when your so-called table effect is done by CSS as opposed to real tables. So that's the real reason why we are moving away from tables as far as layout control is concerned, and use CSS for that purpose.
I noticed that trend in my mobile development groups that they were saying.
Yep. All right, so what we'll do is we're going to take a look at the homework assignment here. And I'm going to do it too, okay? Which means I cannot take submissions at this point because I'm doing it. I don't, and all right, so this is your homework assignment. The first few ones I'm not too concerned about, so we'll skip those unless somebody wants me to go over those. So we're going to focus on dice game. Now with dice game, Carol gave you guys a zip folder which contains all the dice images and so on. And the point is, we want your output to look like this. Now obviously this is not dynamic. This is completely static, right? It just gives you a table. It gives you an idea of what it should look like, but it is not dynamic. But you might notice that the extension of this file is already a PHP. Okay, very good. Okay, so that's good to notice. And also what I'll do is I'm going to click on this file here and save it. Okay, save it in my 10 folder. All right, so I got everything saved here. Let's see how we can go about starting to do this homework assignment. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is to read the description itself. Generate four random numbers between 1 and 6. These will represent the 4 rows of the dice, 2 for the player, 2 for the house. Create 2 totals with these numbers, player total and house total. So, the natural way to do it is to use the first 2 random numbers for player total and then use the second 2 random numbers for house total. But how you want to pair up the random numbers, it's entirely up to you. Create an array of the 6 images in the dice folder. Now this part is confusing because you're really creating an array of the file names of the 6 images. You're not creating a an array of the 6 images. Okay, I'm nitpicking. I'm very good at nitpicking because as a ESL person, okay, each word has meanings to me. I cannot skim like a native person can skim. I cannot skim. So since your random number are between 1 and 6 in arrays, you always start with 0, index 0. There are many ways to do it, so I'll show you how I'm going to do it. Display images for the 2 players dice rolls and the 2 house die rolls using the graphics and post their total. Declare the winner of the game. You must account for a tie game. Loop portion. There should be 3 games visible when the page loads. Look at the example. My table actually is made up of only 4 rows. I simply have those 4 rows being printed inside the loop that runs 3 times, and that's why you see 3 games. Okay. Now, this is a PHP file, but you have no access to the actual source of that PHP file. Okay?
So you can have access to its output, so you can see that, and that gives a great clue how you need to program.
Exactly. Okay, so let's see what is given to me, in that zip file. So I'm going to go to my zip file here and unzip that file, go to dice, and it is just the images. Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's not a big deal. We can start with this. All right? So I'm going to do this homework assignment, on my own personal page. So the first thing I need to do is to send this file over to the server, and unzip it over there, or I can, copy these files individually, which is going to be longer. So for those of you who like command line stuff, or you have exposure to command line stuff, SCP is a command line. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just a
okay. All right, no problem. So I can use SCP just like using copy. Okay, this is command line. If you have a Mac OS X computer, you can probably use exactly the same command. If you use Windows, you can use SCP, which means you're not going to type all of this stuff on the keyboard, but you can still copy files from your PC or Windows machine over to the server. Okay, so I'm going to copy it to my account at arccis.net, and I can specify where I want to put it as well. So I can now say I want to put it over in the public HTML folder, and that's it. Okay, and I can even name it. Okay, I can name this as dices.zip. Okay, and it will ask me for the password to log in to the server. Press the enter key, and it's all done. Okay, so I personally like command line stuff because I don't need to use the graphical user interface. I don't need to leave the keyboard to touch the mouse. Okay, you cannot understand how big of a deal some programmers make out of that. Okay, if you have to lift your hand and leave the keyboard, that is bad. Okay, and that's why the VI editor is designed so that you don't even use the cursor keys. Navigation is only using all the keys on the main portion of the keyboard. You do not even need to touch the cursor keys because that's leaving the home keys. It's already bad enough. Okay, so now I go to my account over there, arccis.net. Okay, enter my password, go to my folder, and the first thing I do is just to unzip that particular file, and it is called dices.zip. Oh boy, okay, I don't have that command already installed, so I'm going to cheat here because I'm going to do sudo. I'm going to install the command first. Okay, now it is installed and I can unzip it. Okay, I cheated, fine. Okay, but it did create a folder called dice, and inside the dice folder we have dice1 all the way up to dice6.png. Okay, so this is the same starting point as what you have. Okay, all right. So the next thing I want to do is to say, I look at Carol's sample page and go like, well, she got most of the work done. So I'm going to leverage as much as I possibly can out of this. Okay? which makes sense, right? You know, in the homework description, you know, she didn't say anything about, oh, please do not copy my HTML code. Okay, and that's not the main point of the homework assignment either. Okay, so the main point of the homework assignment is not the use of the table or the elements or how you print your new win and so on. The whole point of the homework assignment is, you know, how to use a loop, how to use the variables, and so on. So the next thing I'm going to do is to right-click and say, you know, view page source. Okay, it's not too bad. Okay, when you look at this, you go like, yeah, I understand most of it, right? So you can say, I understand HTML head. Okay, we're defining some styles. We have a title for the page, and then we are reloading a particular, you know, a PHP file. Yep, go ahead. Oh, okay, you're stretching? Okay, cool. Not a problem. But when you look at the table itself, when you look at the code of the table, this one is only done once, okay, which is the header of the table. But the rest, there seems like there's a pattern, okay? So when you look at this portion, which is the first row, dice row, and then the declaration of who won the first one, you look at this one, okay, and then you look at the second one. Do you guys notice any similarities?
Yeah, it's the same code. You're just inserting the variables for dice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can see, you know, how they're very similar.
So
Okay.
if you realize that actually we have done this piece in pieces because
Yep.
you did the pictures as part of your index.
Yep.
And then you number this plus this equal to this.
Yep.
And then compare the two, and that's all about it.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is look at this and go like, okay, so we kind of notice that we have 3 copies of about the same thing, but they have minor differences, okay? So what we want to do is to look at that and go like, okay, but what are the exact minor differences, and how do I replace those differences with variables, okay? Because by using variables and knowing what values to put into the variables, I can consolidate all 3 into one single piece of logic and just do it 3 times, okay? So you might notice, the first thing that you might notice is, depending on the value of the dice, it would refer to different images. So the file name of the file name inside the img element changes depending on the result of the dice roll, okay? The alt tag, you know, changes as well, but there's a pattern to it. Okay, if the value of the dice is 6, then 6 is a part of the file name, 6 is a part of the alt text, and, you know, 6 is also would also be used to calculate the 7. Okay, so that means, you know, if I need to identify which portion should be replaced by variables, because her instruction is to use file names, you know, into an array. We can do that, okay? So this part becomes a variable. This part becomes a variable. This part becomes a variable. Is that okay?
Right.
Same thing for house, okay? So we have the entire file name being a variable, the number inside the alt tag being a variable, and then the sum is also going to be a variable.
The class is a variable, the Arwin or HWin is a variable.
Yep, so this part becomes a variable too. But you might also want to notice that there are 3 CSS, you know, definitions here, because we have the person winning, the player winning, the house winning, and also a tie. So you might want to notice, you know, this is where it is used.
Right.
So depending on who is winning or whether it's a tie, this is also a variable. Not only the message is a variable, but which class you want to use inside the span is also a variable. But we are only counting a limited number of variables. We are counting, okay, so let's count, okay? 1, the file name itself, 2, these 2, okay, 3, 4. And then if you want to use a variable for this one, you can. So that's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we have 11, 12. Okay, so 12 variables, you know, at the most, you know, can get this all done. Are we doing okay so far with the rationale, the reasoning of how to get it done. Okay? So now, when it's actual time to do it, you identify the portion that is completely static and does not contain any type of code, which is all the way from the beginning down to here. So even the first row of the table can be copied. Okay, there's nothing dynamic about this portion of the HTML document. So what do? You copy and paste. You borrow from Carol and say, thank you, Carol. Okay, so we just say, this is a technique that I used on the command line. You guys don't have to do it, but it's a very useful trick. So I just use a cat greater than, which is called redirection. And I'm going to call mine exactly the same as dice, so I don't even have to change the link to another name. So I'm that lazy. All right, so we'll just go ahead and do a paste. And if you're using this technique to paste, to stop pasting, you type Control-D. Okay. If you don't feel comfortable with the command line, stuff like this, just use a regular editor. Okay, copy and paste into a regular editor, and then save the file. Okay. But there's also a second portion, okay, because the ending of this thing is also something that I would like to copy and paste. Let me resize it a little bit. Okay, I have to do this first. Resize. The reason I'm resizing is because the people in the back cannot see the bottom part of the screen. So I have to resize it a little bit so now we can all see the bottom part. So I can also copy this portion to end the entire thing, because I'm actually in the middle of a table of that portion that I have already copied. So this is the other portion where we are ending the table, ending the body, and then ending the HTML document. Okay? So we'll do another Control-C, go back to the command line. Oops, not this one. The other one, right there. And then this time we use cat greater than, which is append. So we are appending to exactly the same file, which is dice.php. And I might want to leave some empty space here, just so that I can remind myself, oh, where's my code going to get into? It's this space here, okay? And then I can just go ahead and press whatever key I need to paste, and then press the Enter key. On an empty line, if I type Control-D, that will stop the pasting. Once again, if you don't feel comfortable with the command line way of copying and pasting the code into a file, don't worry about it. Okay, it's not going to be tested. You can use an editor, use your favorite editor to do all the copy and paste. It's no big deal. Okay, all right. So now I have a PHP file. I have my own now. It's also called dice.php. It is a little bit shorter compared to Carol's because I'm missing everything in the middle. So you can see it is missing everything in the middle because the table is a little bit short. But nonetheless, I have the beginning, I have the end, and all that is left to do is to get something in the middle. Am I doing okay so far?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to explain the rationale, or the approach of getting it done. Okay. All right. So what I need to do in the middle. Okay. So we go back to the browser, and then we look at the page, the sample page. It seems like what I need to generate dynamically is this portion. Okay. So what do? I'm going to copy and paste this, but I have to be a little bit careful when I copy and paste this portion because I need to make sure that this is inside my own code under my control. Okay. So we'll go ahead and just do a Control-C on this side, and when we paste, we have to be a little bit careful. Let me go back here. And if you use an editor, you can just kind of paste into the editor. But since I'm not using an editor and I'm using this kind of weird technique to do it, I'm going to paste it into a different file. Yep.
Can we see what you have so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do have so far is this portion.
How it looks on the actual page.
Oh, okay. You want to actually look at the page? Sure, absolutely. So this is going to be arccis.net. My name, dice.php. Okay, so it is it's missing everything that is supposed to be generated dynamically. Yep.
Actually, students should read her instructions completely because she has mentioned, number one, she has given the logic like if you are not using the images,
Mhm.
to use that. And she also mentions to do one row at a time. So, because that's the thing, that instead of trying to copy 6 rows, you just do 2, one for the player, one for
Mhm.
the house. Get that working and then you put it.
Okay. There are many ways to do it, and we will start to talk about subroutines next week,
Okay.
which is great because now we can say, oh, we have to do the same logic here and also here. So instead of copying and pasting the code, we can now turn it into a subroutine and then call the subroutine from different places to trigger the same action to be executed. So that's a good point. All right. So getting back to what we are about to do. Okay. So we are looking at this, and I already put it into my paste clipboard, and now it's time to just put it into here. Pasting here it will work, but it's not going to look very good. Okay. Let me just see what it looks like here. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and paste. It works reasonably well. Okay. All right. Okay. So at this point, if I save the file and redisplay it in the browser, it will have one of the things kind of filled in, but it's static. Okay, and the image is missing because it's in the wrong folder. Okay, but otherwise it seems to be working. Okay, so this is encouraging. So what I do is I go back to my source file and then say, you know what, this part is now generated by code. How do I do that? You just have to say, this is the beginning of PHP code, and this is the end of the PHP code. Okay, but whatever is in between now, needs to be printed as a string. So we'll say, okay, print the following. Oops, as a string. Okay, it is completely static. It's still static at this point, but it is inside the PHP code section.
Oh, that's very cool. I never knew that you could just do with one print statement. The
Mhm.
whole thing. I had like bazillion print statements. Print this line, print
Well, this
this
is the
line.
super lazy approach. Okay, so I want to save my time to do something else. But yes, you can use double quote to cross multiple lines, and you can see how it works in this case. Okay, so when I go back to the page and I refresh the page, it still works. Okay, it's all good. Okay, the other thing that I want to emphasize to this entire class is it really is a good idea to run it from here. Okay, it doesn't seem to make any difference. But what if I miss a semicolon? Let me just go back and change my program, intentionally breaking my program by getting rid of this semicolon, which is needed. Okay. Save the file. Oops, that's not what I want. Just save the file. If you refresh the page here, oh, I guess that semicolon is not enough to cause it to go bad. Oh, that's not what I want. That's what I want. It's not failing because I will have another print statement here. Okay, yada yada. Okay, that should break it. That will break it. So now it's complaining, we have an unexpected print on line 37. So at least it tells you where to go to check for problems, right? But if you load the page, it's not going to give you any information. So that's why I want to encourage the whole class not to use the browser to debug your PHP scripts, especially for syntax errors and stuff like that. Okay, use the command line tool to do it. Because on the command line, it tells me, okay, I keep using the wrong thing. I'm going to close this one. Get rid of it. Okay. So on the command line, it tells me there's a problem on line 37. So when you go back to line 37, you can see that, oh, okay, the previous line is missing a semicolon. So that's why it's complaining.
I was going to mention that this is the common thing in this language. then
Yep.
it does with your problem with this line, but actually somewhere nearby.
Yeah, it's actually common to most programming languages because the semicolon in most languages is used either as a separator between statements or as a statement terminator to end a particular statement. So the lack of a semicolon is not going to be complained on the line where it is lacking. It's on the next line because the next line is not supposed to see a print. It is supposed to see a separator, then the print. Okay. All right, so getting back to this program. Okay, so the first thing that I might want to do is to say, oh, we need to do this 3 times. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this 3 times. But tech, this is all static. It's got all the wrong stuff. It's okay, I just want to do it 3 times. Is that okay? So the control structure to do something 3 times is just a for loop. Okay, there are several ways to do it, but the easiest way is just to use a for loop. So you say I is starting with 0, I is less than 3, and plus I, or I get I plus 1. There are many ways to do it, and I strongly recommend that you use curly braces every single time you use any control structure. It doesn't matter whether there's only one statement in it. Use curly braces, because at some point you will probably want to add some more. Without the curly braces, the program won't work the way it's supposed to. Even though it looks right, the indentation is right, but without the curly braces, only the first statement after the for is really a part of the loop. The next statement is now outside of the loop. So even if the indentation looks right, it's not really a part of the loop. So I do recommend everybody to use curly braces, with all the control structures. Okay, so now that I have changed this program, let me go back and reload it, and it goes like, okay, so that's exactly what I'm expecting. Okay, printing the same stack things 3 times. Are we doing okay so far?
Yes.
But you might notice that I'm changing a little bit, test it, change a little bit, test it again. Okay, I don't try to make many changes to the program and then just hope that it works. Because if you have made a lot of changes and it stops working, then you have to go back and go like, okay, which one of my 20 changes is causing the program not to work? On the other hand, you make 5 changes, you test it again. If it stops working, it has to be one of the 5 changes that you just did. Another tip, your hard drive probably has a lot of space now, because we are now, most computers, especially desktop computers, they come with hard drives, in the order of what, 3 terabytes and so on and so forth. And you have no use of those terabytes, right? So what you do is you screen record yourself doing programming. Okay, find a tool. There are plenty of tools that can do your screen recording. Okay, and you screen record yourself doing your program. In case you forgot what you did to the program to break it, you watch your own clip. Then you can find out, oh, I just got rid of that line that has an extra semicolon or something along that line. So you can actually retrace your steps because you have a record of that. Yep.
Or should I do if 5.5 of my 6 terabytes are already full?
Just get another drive then.
Okay.
You can get an external hard drive. I mean, external hard drive, a 2 or 3 terabyte external hard drive is what, $50, $60? That sounds like a lot of money. How much is a calculus textbook? $300. $300 for a textbook. Now, granted it's a multi-semester kind of deal, but still pretty expensive. All right, so getting back to this program. Okay, so getting back to this program, so the next thing we want to do is go like, okay, so now we really have the hard work. See, I got all the easy work done first because I'm lazy. So now procrastination can only get you so far, right? Eventually you have to get to the tough stuff. You actually have to do things. So at this point, we have to look at this and go like, okay, I know that we have to replace some of these with variables and so on and so forth. So the key is the 4 dice values, okay? Or as you said, you can break it up into 2, you can have a subloop and just reuse the same code. But I'm just gonna go for the 4 variables because that's kind of what the homework assignment said is you have to, have 4 dice rows, okay? So in here, I'm going to have my dice roll values. So we can have dice 1 is random from 1 to 6. Now this is what she asked for, so I'm gonna just do it to conform to what the homework description is talking about. Typically, people with a background of C and C++ or Java programming would go from 0 to 5. In other words, typically when you program in C and C++, you start counting from 0, not 1. Okay. But since the homework assignment specifies that you want to go from 1 to 6, well, we'll do 1 to 6, not a problem. So now we just have to replicate this line several times. 2, 3, 4, there we go. So now we have 4 dice values, but we also need to file names, right? Okay, because as a part of the specification, you're supposed to use an array of file names. All right, so let's do an array of file names here. Now the array of file name doesn't have to be initialized in the loop because it doesn't change. So that can stay out of the loop. So now you say I have file names, okay, which is an array of the following. There are several ways to do this, but since I haven't really talked about how to generate elements in an array, we can just spell this out. So we can spell this out as dice/dice1 .png. Okay. In fact, the way I'm going to do this is to do it this way, so I can just replicate it several times, close the array, and then change the individual items. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. So now we have an array of file names corresponding to the 6 images corresponding to each state of the dice.
What is the right thing after the .png?
The what?
See, if you look at your file names,
Oh.
3 of them have an extra character.
Oh, the comma?
Okay, yeah, so
Yep.
my side is big, so I couldn't see it.
Okay, yeah, it's just a comma. All right, so so now we need to index into that, at some point. Once again, there are multiple ways to do this. You can refer to array items inside. You can refer to array elements inside double quoted strings. So that can come in pretty handy. But you cannot do calculations inside the quoted string. So that means if you want to do it this way, without having a leading item first, it does get a little bit messy. So according to Professor Lever, you can just create an empty item so that you can just use whatever index or whatever dice 1, dice 2, dice 3, and dice 4 have as indexes, without having to do the calculation and add 1, subtract 1, and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So we are almost done here. We need 2 totals, right? We have a player total, and I'm going to pick dice 1 and dice 2 for the player, and then the other one is house total. That would be dice 3 and dice 4. Okay, and then we need a few more things, but I'm not too concerned about those. Okay, so let's just make sure that doing this did not break the program first. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save the file and run it inside on the command line. Okay, it seems to run just fine. Okay, but the actual page would not change. If you go to the browser and just reload it, it looks exactly the same as before because none of the variables is getting used. Okay, I have all those values calculated, but it's not being used. So that's why nothing has changed here. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and make some changes in the code to make use of the variables that we have calculated here. I'm not going to change all of them at the same time. I'm just going to change, say, the totals. Okay. So this total is going to be player $player total, and the other one is supposed to be house total. So $house total. There we go. That's it. Okay, minor little changes, because the more changes I make, the more difficult it is to test the program. So with this one, it's like I don't know. It seems kind of difficult to tell whether it's right or not.
Your logic for you win is not right.
Yeah, the winning logic is not working either, but at least I get to see that these totals are getting changed. So that's encouraging. The program is not broken. Okay, I just need to incorporate the use of more variables at this point. Okay, so I switch back to my editor, and then we look at all of this stuff here and say, okay, what else can I change here? Oh, I can change the file name, right? So instead of using dice6.png, which is fixed and not dynamic, I can now say, hey, this is actually controlled by dice1. But I don't want to put dice1 here, because if I put dice1 here, that means the source of the img is going to be 126. That's not a file name, right? All the file names are stored in dices. So what I really need here is dices, bracket, close bracket. You can actually use array indexing inside double quoted string, so this one should work. Okay, I said should work. It doesn't doesn't sound like there's a lot of confidence. Well, that's why we are going to retest it. It's not working in here. Let's see that I am looking at my right file. Look at the page source, and we can see that it's an empty space here. So that means it's definitely not working. Okay. Well, the other way to do this is to stop. Well, you can always stop the quote, do the concatenation, restart the concatenation and the quote. I was just trying to be lazy and not do this, but okay, with certain things you have to do it. Okay. Well, if I am doing this anyway, well, I'm not going to add to the confusion. We'll just do it this way, and then refresh the page. Oh, wrong one. Refresh, and it is still not loading the images. View page source again, and it is still empty. Okay, dice one, was it dices? Wrong file name. I was using file names as the name of the array, and then I thought it was dices. This is one thing that I really don't like about PHP is if a variable does not exist and you're referring to, by accident, by mistake, referring to a particular variable name that is not what you intended, it will create it on the fly and make it whatever you want it to be, or whatever the context needs it to be, without generating an error message. The command line may actually give you a clue. Okay, so I broke my own rule of not testing it first using the command line. And if the command line doesn't, yeah, there you go. So it does say undefined variable dices, but it's kind of embedded into the output of the program, but it does give you a clue. So I broke my own rule, and as a result, the code didn't work, and I wasted some time debugging it. All right, so now that we know what the problem is, we just need to change it from dices to file names. Did everybody notice what the problem was? Yes? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so I think this time it will give me some images. Yay! All right, that worked. So and we fixed the other one too, right? We'll fix all of the other ones. So every time we see a file name, we get rid of the static file name, but not the single quotes. The single quotes needs to remain because the single quotes belong to the actual output. Okay, the single quotes are not quoting the string itself, the string that I'm dealing with. They are a part of the string that I'm dealing with. So you have to leave the single quotes around. And this time I'm going to try this again. Okay, I'm not giving this up because I think it should work. Okay, array indexing inside double quoted strings, because you can see that the other one has a n double quote, a concatenation, another concatenation, and then another open double quote. This one does not have those things. I'm trying to expand an array element inside double quoted string. Okay, I think it should work. So let's reload it, figure out. Yep,
Yeah.
that worked.
The only difference is if you're trying to copy exactly her code,
Mm-hmm.
then when you go in,
Yeah.
yours doesn't show the quotes and hers shows single quotes.
Okay.
And I thought you wouldn't get to that.
Minor changes. We'll deal with that later. We'll focus on the big stuff first. All right. So far so good. Okay. And the house part is not done. Okay. Well, once we know how to deal with the player, dices, we can deal with the house dices, right? Same deal. So we go here. We look at every place where the static name of a dice image is referred to, we have to replace it with file names, open bracket, dollar, dice, this time is 3, and then the next one is 4, okay, right under that. So we place this one with dollar, file names, open bracket, dice 4, close bracket. All right, so let's double check, make sure that this is all working. All right, so now both the player dices and the house dices are replaced with images. Kind of working, but the alt text is not. Okay, so we have to fix the alt text. If I leave the way the script the way it is right now, I might get sued by the Federation of the Blind, because the screen reader will read out the wrong dices. So the person who cannot see, someone who's visually impaired, will think that they might have lost the game, but they actually won the game, and money is involved, and I will get sued, and that will be the end of my career as a web developer. So you got to make sure that the alt text is changed along with the images. So that's not too bad, because every time you refer to the value of the dice, which is here, you just replace it with the correct variable. So this is dice 1, this is dice 2, and here we have dice 3 and dice 4. Okay, rerun the file. It will look exactly the same as before. You can only tell whether it's working or not by looking at the page source. So we'll go ahead and look at page source. Okay, you can see how 1 2 1 2 4 6 4 6 6 1 6 1 and the sum obviously are working as well. So we got most of it done now. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? The conclusion, the message of who won, is not done yet. So that's going to be the next thing that we are going to deal with. But are there any questions at this point? Not only about the program itself, but also the approach, how I work on this. Are there any questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, we'll go ahead and continue with this program. Because now we need to work on this part, okay? Because this is static, okay? You win is static. We don't want it to be static. So going back to the homework assignment, it says right here. I'm just looking at the messages that needs to be printed, depending on who wins. Declare the winner. You must account for a tie game. Okay, so that means that there are 3 possible outcomes. One is the player wins, one is the house wins, and then the other one is a tie. Okay, so we have to figure out those 3 particular cases. So getting back to the source code, okay, everything that we want to figure out, we want to do it before the print. In other words, by the time we get to the print, we will have the variable, indicating what we should be printing. Okay, so we want to do all the logic before the print. There's only one single print in this entire loop. Okay. Now, there are many ways to do this part, figuring out who won, and also to control what message you should be printing. So I'm going to go for the most obvious ways first. Okay. So the most obvious way to do this is to compare. So you're comparing player total with house total. Okay, dollar house total, and this is the way I write programs. I usually work on the skeleton of a conditional statement first before I go back to fill in what is supposed to be done for each case. So this is a multi-branch conditional statement. If player total is less than house total, we'll do whatever that the currently highlighted curly braces will do. If that is not the case, it will check whether player total is greater than house total. If that is the case, it will do whatever is over here, under else if. If it is neither of these, which means they are the same, it is a tie, then we'll go to whatever is under else itself. Okay? Now, when your program gets bigger, okay, a lot of times the cases, the conditions, will be pushed out of the screen. So it might be helpful to kind of comment inside the curly braces to basically say, okay, if I get to this part of the program, what does it mean? Okay, it's a tie, or the winner, the player wins, or the house wins. Okay, but in this case, it's not too long, so we don't have to use that technique. So over here, I'm just going to say, okay, let's use a variable for the message. Okay, so here we have a message variable that says the player lost in this case, so the house wins. Okay, and over here we have the exact opposite, the player wins, and over here we have a tie. There we go. Are we doing okay so far? So the next thing we want to do is to make use of message as a variable. So we go into the code that is completely static and just change the message itself. I'll deal with the style sheet thing later on. Okay. Remember, do one thing at a time. Okay. Don't try to do too many things at the same time. So we go here and then replace this with whatever message has. Okay. My message may be too simple for you. You might want to do something a little bit more, fancy, but it's okay. The key is, am I getting the right message? Are we doing okay so far? Okay. So let's go ahead and run it, and do it in here first. Make sure I don't get any error messages. I'm scrolling up just to double check, make sure that PHP is not complaining about anything. There's no messages from PHP. So I go back here and go and just refresh my page. Okay, so this is a tie game, very good. You win, house wins. Okay, so far so good. And you can even see that it's using the right colors too. That is weird.
That is weird, and even the phrase is that it's not running your program.
That is weird.
No, you're not running.
That's levers.
Oh, that's levers. Okay.
Oh.
No wonder. Okay, testing the wrong program.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. Okay, so this is mine. Tied, player wins, and player wins. So at least the conclusion is correct. But let's double check one more time. Okay, let's play a few more times and make sure that the house wins is also reported correctly. Okay, so far so good. So what is left is, but these are the wrong colors. Okay, it's the wrong colors because I'm not using the right class for that particular span. Okay, so we go back to this code. Okay, we go back to the original code, and then we take a look at the styles that are defined. So we have player win, we have house win, and then we have tie. So there are 3 possible classes to use. So I'm going to use another variable called dollar class or dollar span class or whatever, however you want to call that, and use it to indicate is it p win, tie, h win, or tie. Whether you want to include the dot as a part of the variable or leave the dot out as a constant in a string, that's up to you. Okay, so we go here, and then we just say that, hey, when the player is winning, we also want to remember that the span class is going to be dot, this is p win. Okay. When the house wins, I got it reversed. This is house win, this is player win, and then the other one is tie. So we say dot tie Was it tied or tie? I cannot remember. Let me double check.
Tie, T-I-E.
Just regular tie, tied. Okay, that should work. So now it is time to make use of span class. So we go here, and then we look at class equals to. Oops. That's okay. Got it. Right here. Oh, the dot is not a part of the name. Okay, never mind. Yeah, get rid of the dot. The dot is only there to indicate that this is a sub class. So we go here, change the pwin to span class as a variable. So this gets expanded, when we print this really kind of long and convoluted string. So that span class will help me, get the correct color for the text. Are we doing okay so far with this? All right. So let's give it a try. Okay, and as usual, run it on the command line first, just to catch anything that may not be difficult to catch using the browser. Okay, no bad things here. So we refresh. House wins, player wins. Okay, we're looking for a case of a tie, and tie is also using the right color. So now the homework is done, as far as I know. Did I miss anything? Okay. So are there any questions about the mechanisms, the things that we have used in this particular program in terms of concepts, in terms of PHP syntax, or the approach of doing this, which I think is even more important? Go ahead.
I just had a quick thing. So the only thing I'm missing is the color text at the end. Is that like 2 points for the color change on the text for the result? Is that included in the assignment? Because I didn't see that when I was
Yeah, it is.
Well, in the assignment,
unless you missed it.
it just says to declare the winner of the game, you must account for a tie game. There should be 3 games. Okay. It does not say anything about using the correct colors.
Okay, no, see, look at the second line on your screen.
Second line.
Your assignment is to recreate this page game. So you run the game, and you see if you're recreating the game, you see the tie is green.
Right. So there's that, and this is where this is why we need judges, right? It's the interpretation of the law.
Do you want the color change or not? Are you gonna mark us down if we don't do the color change? Or?
So in the strictest sense, okay, it is specified. So as you said, in the strictest sense of what this statement says, your assignment will be to recreate this page. Then it will include the specification of who wins and who lose. But in terms of not using the strictest sense of the interpretation, then it really is just the concept, okay? And are you including the images? Are you reporting the right total? Are you coming to the right conclusion of who wins? So I'm going to use the looser version of the interpretation, okay? Because the point of the homework assignment is not to deal with the style sheet or the span class and stuff like that. The key of the homework assignment is, do you know how to use variables? Okay, do you know how to use conditional statements? Do you know how to use a loop? Do you know how to index into an array? Okay, so those are the really important stuff. Okay, so I'm not gonna be too strict about it has to appear exactly the way it is. Is that okay?
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. All right. Cool. Right. So are there any questions about this entire homework, not just the dice game, but also the earlier portions of this particular homework assignment?
Well, see, one thing I've noticed is the things that I expect to be very simple, very intuitive, and they don't work.
Okay, can you be more specific?
Yeah, for example, I was trying to use a string to upper, right? And no matter what I did, it printed a string to upper. Even would put the color inside the parentheses. So like if my color was supposed to be red, it would say string to upper parentheses red, the string to upper parentheses teal. I said, why in the heck is not changing the color and showing my hello world in red theme?
Mm.
And after quite some time, I figured out, okay, it's expecting this string variable, and for whatever reason, it doesn't think that what I'm using is a string variable.
Mm.
So I created a variable, gave it my name as string,
Mhm.
and then used that variable and it worked.
Okay.
So something that simple, and it doesn't work in this language.
I see. Okay. Any other issues other than that one? Yeah, go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. On the color page, for the arrays,
On the color.
for the assignment, I was having issues on the. Are we?
Okay.
Are we
So-
answering questions since we're done?
Yep. So you're talking about this
No,
one?
one more. The colors. So, I've gotten it to work now, but when I was doing it,
Mhm.
it wouldn't allow me. I don't know where I was messing up on it. I think I've fixed it now to where it's acceptable to turn in, but
Okay.
I was just having troubles on the array portion of to put putting it into the HTML code
Okay.
for the colors.
It probably has to do with the quoted string,
Yeah.
and the concatenation
Okay.
issue. So when you encounter issues like that and the program seems to be working, except it's not giving you the right color and
Yeah.
stuff like that, it's really helpful to use the view source part. Because the view source, you would probably see that some of the colors the quote is not ended correctly,
Gotcha.
or it is not even quoted to begin with. So so that's why you're looking at the page source is going to be handy when you're doing that
Gotcha.
sort of code.
Yeah, 'cause
That's another thing that I have not learned properly yet. I can just do double string, everything inside the code that works beautifully. But
Mhm.
when I try to do single code and then break it and then
Yeah.
do something else, it doesn't work.
Well, it's not as intuitive, okay? But sometimes you have to do it that way, okay? But most of the time you do have an option of, do you want to use double quote, just expand everything inside, or do you want to use single quote and break out of the quote, do the concatenation, and then go back into the
That's
single
the
quote?
portion I think I haven't mastered yet, so every time I do it, it's
Yeah. And that's when syntax highlighting really helps, because it will highlight the portion that is the quoted string, and then everything that's outside of the quoted string would have a different color. Right. Any other questions about this assignment? No questions about this one? All right. Let's move on to the next one, the one that's going to be due next week. Because this one is due today. Okay, and let me just double check. Yep, this one is due today. So what we'll do is we'll look at, I'm behind in terms of grading. So if you see a 0, as points, that's not okay because I'm behind, but it is okay from the perspective of, yes, that's what you should be expecting at this point. Okay, so your forms assignment is the current assignment. It is due 1 week from today. And I already sent you guys 2 videos to help with debugging that one. Yep.
maybe I'm not submitting it correctly. So I have an index page.
Mhm.
And every week I say week 1, this problem, this problem, this problem, and then I submit that index, right?
Mhm.
And the canvas says, submit it at such and such time, done. I haven't done it, but I was wondering what stops me from going and fixing my program.
Because I can check the dates.
So you can check the
Of the
dates,
scripts,
yeah.
yep.
But it is doable. It's not like, if I change the date in my program, if I change my program, you are still looking and you will see the most recent version of my program.
Yes, I will change, because I can see this. So when I grade, I can go into the file system. So whatever your file name is, because that's the one that is being linked, so I can tell what is the name of the source.
No, that is my point, that I am submitting my index as, okay, this is my homework.
Right.
I link to my index. But that index is linking to 4 other programs.
Yes, but the index itself can be changed, but not the actual script file containing the code for that assignment.
Okay.
So in this case, it's called dice.php. So when I use a ls-l, I can tell, when was the last moment it was changed, and I can use that as a reference and go like, okay, was this changed, way after the due date, or was it changed, before the due date? But when you have an index page that is indexed that's linking to this one, that one can change all you want. I mean, I'm not concerned about that one.
That's what my concern is. I'm changing my index all the time.
Yeah.
And that is when I'm submitting.
Yep.
So what happens to my programs?
Yeah, it is your actual program that I'm going to grade, so it is the date of that one that I really care. Yep. Question?
Does it show like specifically what was changed?
It doesn't show me what was changed. It just shows what is the last moment that it was changed.
But I have a question.
Okay, I think her hand was first, and then you. Okay, go
I
ahead.
went in and I added a period at the end of the number, but I already submitted and like, is that going to
Well,
count
yeah, 'cause-
against me? Because I already had the program done.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I put a home page to my index on
Yes.
my other assignments, and I saved it. So is it going to show that
I will have to take a look, because when you update, as he said, if you update the overall index page, it's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, that's really is not your
Yeah.
code.
Because see,
Yeah.
I went and because I didn't put a return to my main index page on my stuff, so I was putting it on my older things because I made a new index. So I changed the stuff around and put it, put it to my new, it's called real index instead of because I did the first homework on the index. So I made
Okay.
a real index and then I started putting my stuff and I had to change the
Okay.
tags to take you back to my real index page, my real index page. That's
Okay. So how about this? From now on, don't go back and make changes. Especially with minor stuff like I miss a period here. Yeah, just leave it alone because I'm not gonna nitpick those tiny little things. So just don't modify the modification date.
I
Yeah.
make today an exception because before it's working. Now I forgot to change color. It's not working. So can you make an exception for today? I just changed it and make it not working.
Well, as of now, you guys know not to go back and change it, right?
as of now.
and the video will show the time too. So the video has the current time, so I can actually go back to the exact time, the moment that it'll go like this is the cutoff. Yep. Yep. Go ahead.
I was, as you may or may not have realized on my website, I have kind of a generic layout that goes around all of my assignments. You can always go back. But the thing is while I know now that there is the cutoff thing, so in order to not make it look like I'm going back and editing my assignments, I will make it so that my menus are generated by PHP like I had been meaning to do, but I hadn't gotten around to that. So I've been updating all my lists of assignments, which exist on every single assignment page, even the old ones, so that you can get to any assignment from any page.
Okay.
So I'll stop doing that. I'll get it generated by PHP soon, but that's what I've been doing. So you'll actually go back and find out that literally every single one of my pages has been updated. Like
That's okay.
today.
As I said, since I did not mention this before, the cutoff is 6/11 today. Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm looking through mine and I realized that I at one point uploaded the entire site at once.
Oh, so you updated all the files.
Yeah, I
dates.
use SCP on there
I see.
to do that
Okay.
too.
So it's a good thing that I brought this up
Yes,
so that
thank
you
you
guys
so
actually
much.
check it
I think
out.
that's a nice job.
Well, Carol never had this problem because he would just do it in class and just give you all the points. But I'm a procrastinator, so I just go every day. Okay, I guess I cannot procrastinate any further. Then I go back and grade massive amounts of homework. Yep, go ahead.
I'm also going to have to update my workflow because the way I've been getting my stuff up is I just use SCP to recursively upload my entire work folder because I typed it once, I don't want to type it again, I just want to press up and enter, I don't want to type anything new.
Okay.
I'll change that, but also I'm going to have to update all my pages so that they have so that I can add the PHP list so that I won't have to change them in the future. So in order to get it that way, there's going to be updates after 6/11. That's just a fact. Otherwise, I'm going to be updating them even more.
Okay.
Or I could just strip down every single one of my pages of all of the like fancy stuff, but that would still require me.
I'll try to think of a way to fix this situation. I think the easiest way to fix it is I just take a snapshot of all of your folders at the time when your homework is due.
That's a good idea.
So I just grade off of the snapshot, and you guys can do whatever you want to change later on. So that might be an easier way to go about doing this. Is I just take a snapshot and grade out of the snapshot.
Either that or students can copy their program and write the name, and then the index that they're using for their own purpose,
Yep.
link to that. To the
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
That date and time is when the one that you can check. Is that the one that we create the file or the one that we upload?
Let's see. I think there's a program that can check that. I may not have that program here, but there's a way to tell when the file was created and also when it was last updated.
Because usually I work in my computer. Then if there are lots of files, I delete the entire folder from the website, from the house, and then I upload my own again. However, I don't change the old files in the folder that's in my computer.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think the snapshot approach may work. So I just take a snapshot of everything, up to that point, and then use that for grading. Yep. Go ahead. Of the source files. So I will take a snapshot of all your files at that point. I can do that. It's one single command. It's tar. Just tar. Yep.
For the whole class, it does it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
The thing is the time is not right on the server.
The time is not right on the server?
No, it's basically you have to set the time. You have not set the time. Just take over.
Let me.
My folder,
On your index when you
No, it should be right because I set the time zone for the entire class.
No, it shows the funky time.
UTC?
Yeah, I don't know what it's showing. You have to set it for California.
Okay. Well, the command to set up the time is called tzselect, and you guys can run it too on the command line. So you can say it is America's, and then it's the US, which is 49, and then you use Pacific Standard Time, which is 21.
America's is not working. That's when you see the wrong time. Let's see where
Okay. So you can make this change permanent for yourself by appending this in the file profile.
Default time zone set US/Pacific.
Yeah, but I don't even have it set here. This is the system time. It is automatically set.
The system time is coming in incorrectly.
The system time is correct. I mean, it is.
No, when we display on our page,
Yeah.
and let's say it's 11 p.m., and then we say it is 5 a.m. So it's like GMT plus 6 or whatever.
Right. So it's displaying using a different time zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first I tried time zone set America/Los Angeles. That did not work. So then US/Pacific.
Okay. All right. Good to know that too. All right. Are there any other questions? Any issues? No. Okay.
Well, let's talk about today's assignment first.
Well, let's talk about the assignment due next week, right?
Yeah.
All right. So that's the forms assignment, and I got 2 tips for you guys. How to kind of help you debug the forms. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the assignment itself. All right. So basic form. Use the following web form on your page. Write a PHP script that prints. Please fill out the form to the screen with the form. Once the user fills out the form and hits submit, replace the phrase with the output printed inside an H1 tag or inside H1 element. If the user does not fill out the form correctly, leaving a field blank, have the message, please fill out the form return. Okay. So the key issue here is, do you know whether your page is loading because the button is clicked? That's the first question. Does that make sense? So how many people watched the video that I sent to you guys? So the solution is in there, isn't it? Okay, because when you click the button called submit, it will give you a specific value for my form as a variable. So you check that, okay? So if my form as a get variable doesn't have that specific value, then you know the page is not reloaded as a result of clicking that submit button. Okay, it could be just a reload using the browser. It could be someone just getting to the page the first time, but whatever it is not because somebody clicked the submit button. Is that okay? So that's the first thing you need to know was this page loaded as a result of clicking submit? The second thing you need to know is, how do I know whether a field is empty or not? So let's just say that it is the result of clicking submit, okay? But how do I check whether a particular field is empty or not?
You say empty,
You use empty, or you can compare to the empty string. There are many ways, several ways to do it. So if you're not sure about that, you can always just print out the result of the comparison or the result of calling empty, and see whether that is going to be set or not. Is that okay? Are there any questions? Okay, so let's go.
Let's go to your example, because it was like number one.
Mm-hmm.
So you were saying you run this thing for each, and it will show you the array, right?
Yep. So let's go ahead and take a look at this video.
For the fields that we use require set up in. For the boxes like text. If we use require, yeah, then it makes the user to enter.
But then I cannot test your code if I give you an empty field. So you cannot use require.
No, on the spot, so it makes the user to fill all the fields before submitting.
Right, but the key of so
it should be done by the PHP.
Yeah, yeah. So the point is it should be done by your PHP code. Let's see, is it playing? Yep, it is playing. Or not? It's not playing. Oh, there we go. But there's no sound because I have to change this output playback to. Oh, it's got the right playback. Okay. I'm just looking for the sound, but it's not exactly needed. It's really cranked up here.
It's gonna scream at us. I said it's gonna scream at us.
This is still playing in the video. I'm going to skip over to the portion where I'm actually going to write some code. Yep. There we go. So I'm going to skip to the page where I got the entire program done. Is about here, getting there. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to stop here in the playback, and so that we can just take a look at this for each loop. Okay. The underscore get variable is what we call an associative array, which means the indexes are not numerical. It's not 0, 1, 2, but instead they're based on names. Okay. So each item inside the get variable is called a key value pair, where the key is what you need to locate the value. Okay? But you don't even need to know what keys is available, because the for each has an ability to look at a key value pair array, okay, or an associative array, extract every single key that is in the array, as well as the value corresponding to that key, to become the variable k and the variable v in this case. Now, if you want to change the name of the variables, hey, that's fine. Okay, I'm just using k and v to represent key and value. So once we have these two values instantiated, or getting the value from the get array, we can just use a simple print statement like this one that will basically just print the key is whatever the key value is, and then the value is whatever the value is. Okay, is that okay?
That's it.
The output is not entirely right. I should say. I should have said the key is blah blah blah, but the value is blah blah blah. But it still prints the value and also the key. It's just that the sentence is not very clear.
Okay, so now you can see what happens.
All right. So let's go ahead and go ahead.
Yeah, what is the equal less than sign means in the for each loop on the parentheses, the equal and the less than sign.
Oh, the arrow is
What is the arrow?
Yeah, this is equal greater than.
Yeah, what is that?
It means this key is pointing to that value. That is the syntax that you have to follow. It's a part of the syntax of PHP. So whenever you use this particular form to go through every single key in an associative array, you have to use this particular syntax.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine.
So let's see. I have a page here. Let me fill in a little bit. There we go. Okay, I think this is already enough because it shows you. Oh, okay, it's not paused anymore. Pause. There we go. Okay, so I already submitted the form from earlier. Okay, so fname is what you're using in underscore get to get to the first name, which in this case is this gibberish because that's what I typed. Lname, another gibberish string because that's exactly what I typed before hitting the submit button. But the most important part, okay, how do you know whether the page was actually, whether the page is getting loaded because somebody clicked the submit form? Somebody clicked submit query is my form. Okay, my form as a key in underscore get. Okay, the value corresponding to that key is in this case submit query, which is actually the same as the text here in the button. Okay, but that is the indication that somebody clicked the button in order to trigger the page to reload. So that's the first thing you need to check. Okay, a conditional statement to check. First of all, is there a variable called my form in underscore get? And you can use,
Actually, this was my question.
Yeah.
After watching your video, I was wondering, why do I have to do this? See, I already know the two fields that I'm working with.
Yes.
Lname and fname.
Yep.
Why don't I just say if it's set or is empty, fname and mname, and then just be done with it?
Okay, I can think of two reasons. The first reason has to do with the homework assignment description itself seems to be suggesting that you have to do it. So if you look at the homework assignment description,
right. So you come in and you say if is set get fname or is set get fname, and if they are all
okay. So
set, if they're there, fine. Otherwise, you say please fill out the form.
yeah, so it depends on the interpretation of this sentence, right? So it says right here, once the user fills out the form and hits submit, replace the phrase, when you reload the page, replace the phrase, please fill out the form, with the output printed inside the next one tag. So it seems to me that you only replace the phrase if the submit button is clicked. So if you use another way,
that is the only action on your page. So unless you press the, if you don't press the submit button, you will come in as a default, right?
Not necessarily. It depends on how you format your URL.
If you're saying your default is you have this thing and you say please fill the form, right? So whether you submit the button or not, you will display that.
Okay, so let me present you this. Okay, so let me work on this a little bit. Okay, and I think the file is still on the server. Okay, let me go back to the playback. Where's my playback? Is right here. It's test form 1, so it is still on the server. So we'll go to test form 1. Okay, so arccrs.net, my name. test form 1.php. Okay, so this is the script that I was
Also,
talking
that's
about.
the difference, because when Mike comes in, it says, please fill the form.
Right, now, I can force feed L name and F name, but only using the URL, without clicking the submit button. Okay, so watch this one. So I will go to the URL, okay, put a question mark here, and say L name equals to blah blah,
Right.
ampersand, F name equals to some other blah blah. Okay?
Okay.
When I press the button, you can see that, oh, those two are here now.
Yeah.
But where's submit query? I mean, where's my form? It's,
What do
it's
I
not
care?
there. Why would you care? Well, there are several reasons why you might care, because you might want to differentiate.
Because see, to do that, you have to be a programmer to begin with.
Yes.
User will never do that, right?
The
The end
user.
user.
Okay. This is all about, this is the indicator of whether someone is trying to hack into a website. Okay? Okay, so I'm digressing a little bit. Okay, I'm going to digress just a little bit to talk about, people hacking into websites, because that seems to be a kind of important thing these days, right? With Equifax, having their website, hacked, 140 million accounts got stolen, okay? So it seems like, maybe we should talk a little bit about hacking and whatnot. When you look at the source of this thing, okay, so when you go to view source of anything that has a form, you can tell exactly what the form is about, okay? Which means a hacker can look at this and say, I wonder what would happen if I use, L name being, tag, being all young, and F name being tag. Is tag giving himself some special access to the website, right? And that's how hackers work. Is they try out different things. Okay. If you have a page with products, with product IDs that seems to be sequentially numbered and 1 to blah blah blah, a hacker may come in and go like, okay, so there's only product 1 to product 20 on the screen. I wonder what's going to happen when I ask for product 22, which is not on the screen. So hackers, tend to do things like that, by looking at all the parameters, and it's just, kind of just play with those things and see what happens. So, the lack of my form having the value of submit query is an indicator that somebody is trying to bypass, pressing the button to get straight into, to trigger the execution of your page. So that might be something that you want to check, for the purpose of, as a first line of defense. Okay, it's pretty easy to make, to shut down, to shut up that one, right? Because all you have to do is to say ampersand. Okay, not this one, the other one is to say in the query, in the URL, you say, ampersand. What is that again? My form equals to submit plus query. Because the plus is a space, okay? And then when you press the enter key, now we have, my form is submit query. So I can even pretend that I just click the button. Yes. But every time you have an opportunity to check, something, use that opportunity. So that's all I can say about, why you might want to check, whether you're getting the result because somebody clicked submit query. Okay. Okay. Any other questions about this particular script? Because this is a really interesting script because it shows you everything that is inside the underscore get associative array. Yep.
So I understand that generally get is insecure. Post would be much more secure.
Post is not really that much more secure because even though all the post variables are not displayed on the command line, there are extensions that you can install in Firefox that will make everything apparent to you.
But I think the other limitation is post because we will do only 1,022 characters. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have any binary or pictures, so please make it.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not particularly more secure. It just lets you get more stuff to the server. Okay. Any other questions about this particular page? Well, maybe it is helpful to show you the source code of this one, just so that we can look at it.
One more question. question.
Yeah.
And of course, this is beyond our current capacity. So
Right.
I noticed that when the user enters the names,
Mm-hmm.
it says name is this, but it disappears from the screen. So why it is not retaining the name?
Because I did not put the value of the name back into the form itself.
But if the user had done, it's like if you go to this page,
Right.
and then enter the name, once it displays the name is this.
Okay, so let me address that after I explain the rest of the program, and then I will go back and explain that. Okay, so that's a good point. Okay, so the other video, if you look at the second video, it shows you a technique to debug your script. Not by, because with something like this, where you have some kind of interaction with a form inside the browser, it is not as helpful to use PHP-CGI to debug your script. Now, PHP on the command line will still be very useful for detecting syntax errors. Okay, if you miss a semicolon or forget to close a curly brace, running PHP on the command line will still catch those mistakes. But logic mistakes, it won't be able to catch anymore. Okay, because it depends on the interaction between the page and how you interact with the elements inside the page. So in that case, this is a technique to store a message inside a file, inside a log file. So this way, you can run the script up to a certain point, but if you have a file put content, up to that point, that will still be logged. So in this case, I'm putting all the logs inside this particular file called, inside the folder called logs, and the file name is testform1.log. Let's check out what is in that thing. So we have logs/testform1.log, and this is the content. Exactly what we did today, right? The first time I actually clicked a button. The second time I reload it without doing anything, and then I use the URL to force to inject fname and lname. And then the last time I do the injection, but I also pretend that I'm clicking something. So you can see the result of every single one of those execution of the script. But since it is logged, it means you can go back in time and analyze the log to try to figure out what might not be working right in your program. And there's also no limit of how much you can log. If you want to log a lot of stuff, that's fine. If you add a timestamp to the log, it's even better, because now you can click it multiple times, but each time you click it, it generates its own chunk of log. Now, when you execute a script in an interleaved fashion, that can be very confusing, but most of us do not have to worry about it in a class setting. In a commercial setting, then you have that problem, because you have the same script being triggered, being executed multiple times at the same time, because many people are trying to load that page at exactly the same time. So in that case, the prints can be interleaved from multiple execution of the same script, and that can look very confusing. But for your scripts, because for the most part, you're the only one who is going to trigger the execution, so you don't have that problem using this technique.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the get and the post difference? There's a get and then post and one action. What's that for? I don't know.
The action. Okay, so when you look at the form, this is the actual code of the form itself, and the submit is what is creating that button called submit query. If you want to change the label of that submit query, you can actually change that too. So if you look up the different types of elements you can contain in a form, that will tell you everything that you can do with a submit button.
I mean the top form method get.
Mm-hmm.
What's that different with the post?
A post, okay, that's something that you just answered a little bit earlier. A post allows you to upload a file. There's no size limitation of what the content of a variable, so you can actually upload something that's really big. As far as get is concerned, it depends on the browser. Okay, so what you said is partially true. The 2,000 bytes or 2,000-ish byte of limit of a get variable or the entire get message is Internet Explorer only. If you use Firefox or Chrome, the limitation I think is like in the range of 50K to 60K.
Okay.
So the 2,000 byte-ish limit is only Internet Explorer. But nonetheless, some browsers has that limitation. So if the content that you need to post or you need to send back to the server exceeds 2,000 bytes, you might want to use post so that you have more cross-browser compatibility. Is that answering your question?
An action, we don't need to do anything.
The action part specifies that you can have multiple actions, and okay, let's check out form get.
An action where our file name would go if we had another file to perform an action. Like if a PHP file was running this thing other than this file, then you would put it in action, right?
Yep. So what I'm doing is really the best thing, I think, because I'm showing you guys how to learn on your own. Because remember, trust me, with a class like this, with HTML5, with PHP, the standard is moving. The moment you walk out of the classroom, what I'm teaching may be obsolete already. So focusing on what I'm actually teaching may not be as beneficial as learning how to learn on your own. Okay, so what I've just demonstrated is how to use a search engine. Focus on HTML because we are dealing with forms, but it's HTML forms, and we are concerned about the get and also the action part of it. So once you add all of these things, that may not be the first one, then it is the first link. So the first link says HTML form method attribute, and if you click it, it will contain the definition and the usage of the form element itself, notes on get, append form data to the URL using name value pairs. Okay, we got that covered. That's all the stuff after the question mark of the name of the script. Okay. The length of a URL is limited, especially on certain browsers. It's 3,000 bytes or 2,000 bytes ish. Never use get to send sensitive data. Will be visible in the URL. Okay. Now that is it depends on whether the end user, the one who's using the browser, really should not be viewing that sensitive data, because when you turn in something, there are all kinds of plugins that you can install in Firefox that will tell you everything about every single request. If it's a post request, it will give you a rundown of everything that is posted, everything that's being sent back to the server. All the cookies, all the variables, okay, will be visible. So I'm not really sure about this one here. Okay, it seems kind of questionable to me. Useful for form submission where a user wants to bookmark the result, because when you bookmark, you're also bookmarking all of this stuff. So every time you use that bookmark to get back to that URL, it is pre-filling the form for you with all of those values. Okay, so that can be helpful. Let's see here. Useful for form submission where a user wants to bookmark the result. Okay, that's just what we said. Get is better for non-secure data like query strings in Google. That part is definitely questionable. This is post, and what we want to know is about the action. So let's go to the, nope, this one doesn't say anything about the form action. Form handling. Okay, so the action, okay, now I know what I'm supposed to talk about. Okay, so the action, let's go back to the action. Okay, when the action is empty, it means when the button is clicked, reload this very same form. What if you want to load a different form when you click the submit? Specify that in action. Yep.
In her class notes, she says that the action should not be left empty. The action also cleans out form elements that might be buried in the get or post memory. The action is a redirection attribute. Once the submit button gets pushed, the form will redirect. Okay. Typically, this is the URL of the script. However, it should be noted that when writing PHP, Perl, or ASCII, you should not leave the actions empty. And the homework was given empty, so I was actually trying to.
So it wouldn't retain the values.
Yeah. So wondering, you know, I mean, how much do we hew to the class notes?
Well, first of all, let me check that. Okay, let's not specify action at all, and see what happens with this particular page. Okay, test again. Click. So it is still lost. So the next thing is to specify action being the current page, okay, which is the default value to begin with. So this is test_form1.php. Oops, missing a double quote. Go back here. Okay. And click that. It is still lost. So, you know, it's not, I don't think it's really that important. Now let's do something even more fun. Let's change this one to the script that we just wrote today. Dice. What do you think is going to happen now? When I fill in the form, blah, 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 blah. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's trying to go to dice game and pass it F name and L name.
Yep.
As if dice should do something with it, and dice will say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yep, exactly. So when I click submit query this time, oh, it didn't go.
Because I think you have it in a different directory.
No, it's in the same directory. The dice PHP is in the same directory.
So dice
You have
game.
double quotes on both sides?
It should be. Let me double check.
I think it's dice game.
No, it's dice.php. It is here. It's in the same folder. Okay, maybe it needs to be spelled out. Okay, now it's completely spelled out as a full URL. And click. There we go.
There you go.
Yep, it just needs to be a full URL, cannot be a relative URL. Yep. But one thing we can do now, we can merge those two programs, right? Player sounds so remote, sounds so really not personal, right? So instead of saying player win, you, and stuff like that, maybe you can refer to my name.
Yeah.
How about that? Huh? Okay.
So if we connect it, it's going to say our name on it now?
I'm going to change it so that it does. Okay, so that it does when f name is defined. If f name is not defined, it will just say you. Okay, it's generic. But if f name is actually defined, then it will just use that name.
That's awesome.
You guys want to try that out?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm giving myself a new homework assignment, right? Okay, so let's see how we can combine these two programs. So we vi dice.php, and the very first thing I need to do is to find out is there a f name, a first name already given to me. Okay, so I'm going to say. Let me see, how do we check whether something is defined or not in PHP? Is it set or is set? Is set, right? Yep, there we go. All right, so we can use that to check things. So we'll say if is set get, and then L name, F name, first name. Then we'll do this. Else we'll do something else. In other words, I'm going to use a variable to store the name that it will refer to, as the player. Okay. So in this case, I will use you. Okay, is going to be whatever f name is as a get variable because it is defined. Okay, it's passed to me. If not, u is just generic u. Okay. All right. So now we can go to my script and look up everything that is u. Okay. Oh, there's only one uppercase u, but there are many lowercase u's. So every time I see uppercase u, I want to replace it with a reference to the variable u. Okay. One. Okay, there's only one place, which is fine, okay, because I just need to check whether the program is working or not. So now we go back to this part, and we have to go back to this page first. Okay, and give it an actual name. and now the player is replaced. It's not you anymore. It is tag. Now I can also use it, in player wins, tag wins instead of player wins. But you can see how you can use the data collected by the form of one page and send it to and trigger the execution of another page that would actually make use of the get variables. Is that okay? It doesn't have to be the same page, even though most of the time it is the same page, but you can make it go trigger the execution of another page. Yep.
Okay, I ran into an issue with isset versus empty. What if you let the first name be empty?
Leave it to be empty. Okay, first of all, let's check whether this will go back to you if I do not supply anything. So we get rid of all of this stuff, right? And just press the enter key, it went back to you. So isSet is working correctly. You want to change it to empty?
I wanted back on the submit page, make the first name empty.
Ooh.
Just the last one.
Oh, okay, so manually make it empty. Get rid of this. Like that? Okay, let's try that. So it is still set, it is an empty string.
Right.
Yep.
So that's where I ran into that issue. So I found that the empty function allowed me to work around that. So I could tell whether indeed there was something in first name and last name.
And you can tell from the get too. So you can see right here, f name equals to.
Yep.
That makes it an empty string. Now if I take this out and refresh the page, then you will be back.
Right.
Because it is missing entirely. Nobody tells me anything about f name, so it does not even exist if I remove that part.
Right, I understand.
Yeah. So you're differentiating between, is set, which is basically saying, is it defined? But if it is defined, it can be empty. As opposed to empty, which basically means it is defined, it is here, it has a value, but it is an empty string.
Yeah, I just ran into this issue because we had to make sure that both of the names were filled with something to display it.
Okay, so to illustrate that a little bit more, we can go back to this program and make a differentiation between not having it defined, which would use the very generic U, or it is defined, it is empty. Okay, so in this case, we'll have one more differentiation here, which is basically using if empty $get bracket f name and remember I always work with the skeleton of the code first. Okay, and then we put some code back in here. If it is not empty, I want the actual thing. But if it is empty, I don't want to display just an empty string in place of U. So I'm going to say U equals to anonymous player. Okay, somebody who intentionally did not want to use a name. Is that okay? So now we'll go back and check on this one and see what happens for all three possible cases. So we go back. This time, we supply an actual name, click it, and it says tag. We go back. This time we specify an empty string. Okay, we leave the text box empty, but when we click submit query, it will still submit and say that f name equals to nothing. Okay, because it is still a part of the form. Everything in the form, especially text fields, has a value. If you don't specify anything, it is empty. Okay. Submit query, it should say okay, it didn't say anonymous, it is all empty. So empty didn't work.
It's within an isSet.
It is within isSet. It is set, but it didn't. It went to this branch instead of this branch. It did not recognize that f name is blank.
Because f name is still being passed in the URL.
Yes.
Okay, so the empty would have to be outside of this set.
No, I think we just have to compare that to the empty string.
How would we just use $sign U equals to double quotations like empty, nothing in there, like
we'll give this a try and see whether it can compare to the empty string and match. And we refresh this page, and now it becomes anonymous player. So the comparison to the empty string is not the same thing as empty, which is awfully confusing.
Empty doing then?
On the other hand, if I take this out entirely, if I run the dice script without supplying anything, take out all of this stuff, then it would just go back to you. Because now fname does not even exist. It's not even an empty string. There was no attempt to supply a first name. And then as a result, my script as it is right now is going to use the default value of you. Is that okay? All right. So if we feel really awfully confused at this point between is null, is set, empty, and that kind of stuff, what do?
Google it.
Google it. Very good. Okay, so but this time when we Google, we have to be careful, and we want to compare the results of the Googling. Okay, so we say PHP is null, and pop one page, one tab to deal with this. Okay, then we go back here, and we use empty, which seems to be doing about the same thing, but it's not. Open up another tab. So now we compare these two tabs here. Okay, the description, the overall description is useless. It says finds whether a variable is null or not. That is not true. Because when you read the description a little bit more, it will say returns true if var is null, otherwise false otherwise. And then the other one, when you check for empty, return false if var exists and has a non-empty value. Non-zero value otherwise returns true.
That's empty.
That's empty. So here's var. Here is null. So is null is really checking whether it exists or not. And that's why it worked in the script, because if you do not pass fname equals to something as a part of the get request, it doesn't even exist in the underscore get variable. That particular key does not exist.
Okay, but we weren't even using is null, we were using is set. And there was a query that compared empty to is versus C.
Yep. So now we look up is set and see whether it is consistent with what we understand. Returns true if var exists and has a value other than null, false otherwise. So it has to, there is a conjunction. It has to exist and it has a value other than null. So when in our script, we are checking is set. So if we get to this portion of the program, it means two things, right? The conjunction has to be true, the variable has to exist, one, and two, it is not null. But it can be empty. But empty doesn't work because empty is checking something else. When you look at the empty description, it is supposed to work when it's an empty string, except it didn't work this time. Yep.
What is the opposite of is set?
The opposite of is set technically is not is set. You put an exclamation point before is set. But I think what you're really asking is the opposite of is set empty or is null or one of those things, right? I think that was your intention. Yep.
So I went along the same lines and first I tried not is set. And my goal was to find out if it's an empty field, that user has not entered anything. So that solved like half the problem, and then I added to it or empty. And that seems to be working, but now after looking at your demonstration, I think it's not the right choice.
Okay. But the documentation is not entirely right
so
either.
One, the goal for any field, whatever the field is to find out if the user has entered anything.
Right.
So what one should be doing?
Okay, so getting back to the three cases that we are able to differentiate at this point, okay? So we go back to the script, and the three cases that we can differentiate because it is illustrated by the demonstration that we just did. The first one is to use isSet to see whether a particular key is inside underscore get. If it is missing, if isSet is returning false, that means that parameter was never passed as a part of a URL to this particular script,
Okay.
which is a good sign to indicate that someone did not press the submit button, which is probably because somebody just typed in the URL and just press the enter key. So in that case, you want to print out the form and ask the user to fill in the form. Is that okay? If it is true, okay, so the else is when you print out the form and say, okay, fill in the form, because it's lacking entirely. So now you're left with two possible cases. What if isSet is returning true? Then you can, if you want to, you can differentiate. And in fact, in your homework, you have to differentiate between these two cases. Did someone forget to fill it in where the value of that particular get variable is an empty string, or it is filled in entirely, or it is non-empty at least, so that you can conclude that the form is in fact filled in correctly. So those are the three possible cases, and I think those three possible cases are in the homework assignment, that you have to differentiate between those three possible cases. Is that right? Okay, let's go back to the homework and check. All right, so right here, okay, let's parse this, carefully, so that we don't miss anything. It says right here, once the user fills the form, okay, so let's stop. How do we know the user filled out the form? One, my form has a value.
Yeah.
Okay, it has submit query. Two, L name and F name are set. Okay, so isSet is true for both of them. Okay, so those are the indications that the form is filled. And if it is filled, you want to replace the phrase of your please fill out the form with the output print out inside the H1 tag. Now, if the user did not fill out the form correctly, leaving a field blank, forgetting to put in one of the fields, then you want to have the message of please fill out the form. So you have three distinct cases here, just like the three cases that is already illustrated with my DICE program.
Yeah.
Are we good on that one? In other words, I just did your homework accidentally. I need to go back and erase the video now. Yep.
Actually, I think we have more than three cases because we have to check both the first name and the last name.
But you can make it as one.
Okay, this is one case. Okay, the first case is it is not triggered by the button. Nothing was given to you, so you have to differentiate that case and then print the form itself and then print the message of please fill out the form. That's the first case. The second case is it's kind of ambiguous, whether there's a second case and a third case, and whether those two are really like kind of sub cases of each other. But you need to differentiate whether the user has filled out the form. That's the first one, and you also have to figure out whether the user did not miss anything. So I'm interpreting this sentence to mean that the user in fact filled out the form correctly and then submit the form. That will be the second case where you just print out the content of the form itself or content of the variables. The third one is the user filled in the form or clicked the submit button but did not fill in the form entirely. So in that case, you need to have to print the message of please fill out the form. Now, is this a part of, should you also present the form again so that the user can fill it in? That was not clear. Is that okay?
You can use it in one if statement, right? Because you say if not is set F name, or not is set L name,
Yeah.
or is empty F name, or is empty
You can do that, but this is already kind of giving you the 3 branches that you need. This branch here is when a field is missing, where you have to say, hey, you forgot about this field. This is the case where everything is done correctly. You just say, okay, the form is all filled in. This is the data that you gave me. This is the case where it was not triggered. The execution of the script was not triggered by somebody clicking the submit button, which means you have to present the entire form and ask the user to fill in the form. So I just differentiated all the possible cases using those particular conditions. Is that okay? But one thing is bugging me big time is when I use empty instead of comparing to the empty string, it did not work. It did not catch the case when fname is empty. But when I do it this way, it caught it. But when you look at the description in PHP, empty specifically say that these are all considered empty, and it used even a double quoted empty string, just like what I did in the compare. But it didn't work. So this kind of stuff really bugs me because the documentation is not consistent with the behavior of the program. And unless I made some mistake, interpreting the description, something else is going on. I think there's an implementation issue, or somebody forgot to test empty and make sure that it reports true for all of these cases.
So if I use empty, I need to redo this.
Well, you still have time. Yes. So the answer is yes, because the point is you want to be able to differentiate. But before you redo it, I would check it first. So you would fill in the form, hit the submit button, but you intentionally did not put anything into a text field, and see if your program is still working. If it's working, let me know, because it's definitely not working in my case.
So what do you mean working? Is it sending that empty?
Is it differentiating it? Okay, so let me go back to my DICE form, or DICE program, and go back to what I used earlier. So this is a pretty common technique in programming. You comment out a line, and then you make a copy, and then you change it. Okay? So the intention of doing this is so that you know what the original code looks like. You can compare the original code with the modified code so that it's easy to compare and contrast. Okay, what did this do to the program? How did it change the behavior of the program? So let me save this for sure. Go back to the web browser. Go back to that page. And this time I would supply fname equals 2, which means there's nothing, right? It's defined to be an empty string. Press the enter key, and it worked. It reported anonymous player. But it didn't work last time. But last time we had another variable, maybe. And that still worked. Well, since everything is recorded, I can go back and double check and see whether I made a mistake or not. But it seems like empty is working in this case. So I'm not really quite sure why it didn't work in the other case.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I don't think I'm understanding that other section about telling if they hit the submit button or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Professor Weaver's notes and go to Forms in PHP, submit triggers, is that another way to do it? What she has there?
Okay, let me see if I have access to that, because I have been trying to get to her notes, not the homework description, but her notes.
Yeah.
So let me go to the modules, and then the top link is supposed to go to her notes.
Well, if you just do look at dells.com/notes, I think you'll get it.
Okay, so that's that,
Yeah,
right?
We can't even log in to see like our homework. She said that we'll be able to see our finished, after she grades it or whatever, she would post the solution of the homework.
Okay, well, it's my responsibility now, so I'm going to be the one posting the solutions.
Okay.
Kind of like what I did earlier today with the DICE program.
Okay.
So I can recreate the solutions to all
Gotcha.
of the homework. Yeah.
Those things you were just saying are in your notes.
Say that one more time.
The things you were explaining were on your notes.
Where?
Under this page, right?
Yeah,
In the forums. So we have action. Okay, action is a redirection, but it was not clear that you have to supply the entire URL and not just the name of the script, assuming that it is in the same folder. Okay, the method. Okay, that's something that we have done already.
No, I was looking at forms in PHP submit triggers.
Okay.
Usually on this set we can put the submit button.
Oh, okay. So there are sub items here.
Yes, under.
Under which one?
See, it says forms in PHP. It's a main button.
Okay, under forms.
No, not under forms. Go down a little more. Forms and PHP.
Oh, forms and
Then
PHP.
go to submit triggers.
Okay.
And then it says a submit trigger is a variable whose actual value is meaningless if attached to the submit button. If it is set, it tells us the submit button is clicked. Is that another way of doing what you're showing?
Yeah, just instead of F name we can put the submit button's name, like formats.
I'm not sure what you're asking. Okay.
You wanted to make sure
I
that the
think
person
what-
was actually clicking the button and not putting stuff in the URL.
Mhm.
Is that another method, or am I not understanding?
Okay, so in this case, the name is form X and the
Yeah.
value is submit.
Yeah.
So you can check the name of the form
Yeah.
against the value that you're expecting.
Exactly. See, when you showed for each key
Mm-hmm.
value combinations,
Mm-hmm.
so the third one was submit,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
if the goal was to make sure that submit was pressed, so
Mhm.
you would look at that and say, if that is set,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And then that would determine that.
Right. So in this case, it has a specific name instead of having the implicit name. Now it has a specific name. It has a spelled out name, as
So
opposed to
is set form equal to submit?
right. So instead of having this one, having the name of my form, the notes is just saying, okay, the name is form X, and the value is now explicit as well, which is submit instead of submit query, which is the default value of the submit button.
But then it says if is that get form X. Is that the way it checks then to see if it's
Yeah. So this is to check whether the execution of this PHP script is the result of clicking the submit
Right.
button. Yes.
So is this just another way of doing what you were showing us? Is it the same concept?
Okay, so the way I did it, the way I suggested to do it, is not really just to test whether it is set or not, but really to check the value to see whether it spells as SUBMIT. So you're checking that it is there, and on top of that, it is also spelled the way it's supposed to. But I think just checking that it does exist is fine, because any hacker can just look at the form itself and be able to tell what it is supposed to be. Now there are ways to check to make sure that the hacker is not reading it out of the form. In other words, you can use the current time and date as a part of what you're expecting. Okay, so in that case, but you will need some additional stuff. You need JavaScript on the side of the browser to generate the right value to pass back. But that's one way to kind of help to curb bots of turning in forms automatically. And you might have noticed that that's a big thing these days. When you go to any WordPress website and you want to register and say, yes, I am a human, you have to go through layers and layers and layers of stuff to make sure that the other side understands that, no, I'm not a bot, I'm a real person, and I just want to have an account on your website. And it's because the bots are getting smarter and smarter. The bots are really nothing more than scripts pretending to be people clicking things, right?
Yeah, but they all get smart too, and then they will be able to recognize those images also.
Right, yes, and that's why.
If a computer can drive a car, they can also recognize those images and say, show me, click all the boxes with an image of a car.
Yep. So all you can do is to stop this the dumber scripts, but you cannot stop it all. I mean, in the worst case, someone a real hacker would just go pay really low salary in a country where people are really poor and people are waiting for jobs. Yeah, so they can there's no way to defeat it entirely, but if you can defeat most of the bots, then you have already achieved a good portion of what you need to do.
So when the bot is attacking, your stuff, are they trying to get your information, or what is the?
Most of the time, they're trying to sign up for an account and then use that account to launch further attacks.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to spam somebody else or to post things that are fully automated. Yeah. Yep. So that's what they're trying to do to sign up for accounts. All right. So are there any other questions? I mean, is this okay? I mean, so far. Yep.
Sorry to belabor, but I'm just following up on what she asked. Which way do you prefer that we do this? Is there
Well, if this code is here, this is fine.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm just pointing out that just knowing that it does exist doesn't mean that it's going to have the value that you're expecting.
Right.
Yeah. But that's also how you can differentiate. Have you guys seen web pages where there are multiple forms and multiple buttons to submit? Okay, so how do you know which way to process it, right? They might have one side and say that if you're already registered, just enter your name and your password and click here. If you're a new user, type in your desired name and try to register as a new user. So how does it know which one? We are looking at it because the two submits have different values. They may have the same name, but they will have different values. So when you get the form or when you get the script to run again, not only are you going to check, like what we are doing here, not only are you going to check whether it is set or not, but you can check the value. Then you can see which button was clicked to get the form to reload. Then you can decide what to do with it. Okay? Let's try that. Let's make a form just like that, and then we'll play with it. Okay. And we'll just copy and paste this. We'll call this multi-form. And paste. And the first thing we'll do is we'll just replicate this a few times so that we have multiple forms. So we got 5 lines here, paste again. And then we'll end the body tag and HTML. And we'll change one of these to submit. Okay, we'll call it the other submit. There we go. All right. And the page is called multi-form.
It's going to launch under action. You have when you hit submit, it's going to launch into form 1. It's under action. You're redirecting it to another form.
Oh, okay. But you can tell from the URL that form X gets a value of the other submit. So even though I didn't correct the action, you can still tell that I can differentiate between the first button versus the second button. So that's why in the website, in the instruction, when you only have one single submit button, this is fine. When you only have one single form in the entire page, this is fine because there's only one way. Okay, there's only one action to trigger. On the other hand, if you have multiple forms and you want to handle the multiple forms using exactly the same PHP file, then you might need to do something that can differentiate the value of the variable called form X in this case. So not only does it have to exist, you have to check the value and see, okay, which button did the user click? Yep.
Just one more question. For best practices, wouldn't you want to name the forms differently? Form X, Form Y?
You could do that too, but it's not necessary.
Okay. But I mean, as a programmer who writes web scripts, is that a better practice, or?
So you're comparing the two techniques. One is to use two different _get variables, and the other one is to use the same _get variables but different values of that get variables. I would say they're equivalent. I don't think there's one. I don't have a strong preference one way or another.
It's just the get global variable will have can't distinguish between the two forms. You have to look at the value.
Yeah, you need one way or another. So you can either check which one exists in the _get, or you have to check the value of the one that does exist and see which value it has to differentiate. How did I get here? Yeah. So, but to me they're equivalent. I mean, there's no. I don't have any strong preference one way or another. Yeah. So are we still doing okay so far with all this discussion? Okay. So according to this, action is just form 1, which means if I change the file name to form 1, it should work. And we'll check, because that didn't work earlier. So it might be because I forgot something, I misinterpreted something. Okay, form 1. There we go. That worked. That worked too. I wonder what happened last time when it didn't work. Did I misspell the file name?
No, you had called it multi-form, and the action point is just form
No,
one.
but way earlier with
way
test form
earlier.
1.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I might be. That part I don't know.
About the empty, not accepting the empty string.
Possibly. Okay, well, here's the other one. If I did fill in something here and something here, when I click submit, okay, I might want those values to reappear here. Okay? How do we do that?
To be back there.
Mm-hmm.
So we can use the get.
Okay, so you need to append those things. We need to make use of these in order to populate the value of the elements inside the form. That is what you need to do.
Do we need to
Use LM equal to and FLM equal to and put those values back in.
When you create the elements inside the form, okay, where's that? Form 1. Okay, I changed the name of this to form 1. So in addition to type, name, and so on, you might want to say what the value is. Okay, now I'm just going to hard code it here. Okay, so I'm going to hard code this one to some kind of default animal. So I'm going to default it to cat, just because Carol likes cats. Okay, and food, granola bars, stuff. Okay, this is my favorite. Sushi. Okay, so let's see what happens when I reload this form here. So how do you do this in the script? So when you submit a script, okay, let's say somebody filled in the first name but not the last name, and you want to print a message and say, hey, you forgot to fill in your last name, but here's the form that you have filled in up to this point: first name, phone number, address, and so on. But you just want to highlight the one that the person missed. Okay, how would you do that? You use the values of the get variables to repopulate all those fields, so that they will still have values in them when you reload the form. We do okay so far with this, or not? Sort of? Okay. So how do you do it programmatically? Now this is all hard coded, right? Which is not cool. Okay. Oops, too many. Okay, so if you were to do this with a script, This is where we start the script, and this is how we end the script, right? And we'd say print, and she's using double quotes of, on here already, so that means I have to escape all the double quotes. And there's a quick and easy way to do it in VI. And I want to replace a single quote with backslash and a double quote. Ta-da! That is why I use VI. Okay, now I'm not expecting you guys to learn VI in one semester. Okay, that would be suicidal. I wouldn't do it. Okay, but over time, as you learn more about scripting and programming in general, you might want to kind of ease yourself into learning how to use VI or a slightly more powerful editor where you can do regular expression, because it is really helpful. But now I have this entire string. Actually, I think it might have replaced the last one, the one that it's not supposed to replace, with backslash. Okay, so now we want to look at this one and go like, okay, so how do we reprint everything here? So the way you do it is to replace this cat with the variable cat, which we'll initialize earlier. And okay, let's not call this cat, let's call this animal. And this is food. And then before the print, this is where we will initialize those variables. Animal is that. And then food is that. Okay, so let's double check this code again. The 2 lines of assignment statements before the print statement is going to all your get variables and say, hey, if we have an animal already specified, get that value and put it into the local variable animal. If we already have food in the get variable, store that into the variable food. And then in the script itself, inside the print, when I'm creating the field for animal, I'm saying that, oh, let's use this as a value. So if you already have filled in the form and you click the submit button, this will get populated with whatever you filled in. Okay, or at least that's the theory. So we'll go back here, test it, and you can see how this is all using the previous one. I'm gonna change it, cat versus sushi. And I hit the submit button, and you can see how those fields are back. Is that okay?
Can you clear it after the question mark?
Clear out everything?
Yeah, when we run the form.
Sure. So if you clear out everything, then they will be empty, because they don't even exist.
After we then it will store it.
But this also gives you the option of giving the end user a particular message when one of them is missing entirely, and you can just say a message and say, okay, this is missing. Okay, so let's check out how to do that. Okay, so to do that, you kind of have to first differentiate and say, okay, was the execution of this script the result of a submit? Because if it is not, you may not want to complain. Because this is the first time somebody saw the screen and you already complain. It's like, this is missing, this is missing, this is missing. Okay? So you want to differentiate that. So you want to go differentiate between those two by using is set. Okay? So you say if is set $_get. In this case, the name is form X. And I'm just going to check for the existence because there's only one submit button in this case. And whenever you have an if, I always put in the else. Okay. So if it is set, but one of these things is missing, okay, so we want to put these two ahead of this. Okay. So here you can now use empty. You can say if empty animal complaint 1, equals to, please specify an animal. Okay. And then you use another conditional statement for the other one, which is food. If food is empty, not specified, then you have another complaint, and this is complaint 2. Please specify some food. Oops. Nope. Wrong place. There we go. All right. Is that okay? So the complaint is going to go after the text, favorite animal, and then we'll just stick complaint 1 here, and then we'll stick complaint 2 over here.
Don't you need them to initialize as blanks?
Well, they all start with initialized. They're assumed blank when you refer to them, and they do not exist. But it's a good idea to make sure they all get initialized. So you're absolutely correct. It is a good idea to check and make sure that they are initialized. So we will say else. Oh, we can just pre-initialize everything to blank first. So we say complaint 1 is empty. Complaint 2 is empty. Okay, good idea. All right, so let's check the script. If I click submit, it complains 1, but not the other one, because there's a space here. Is that a space character? Nope. It didn't complain about food. Oh, that's because of the else. Okay, wait, hold on a second here. Did you guys catch what just happened? That extra else was not a syntax error, but it made the program run incorrectly, because it is now an else if, which means one and only one of these branches will run. If I run the first branch, the second branch is not going to run. If I get rid of this else, then we have 2 parallel conditional statements. They both run all the time. Okay, so that's a really good error to make. It's very illustrative of the logic errors that you can get. So now if I click the submit button and I do not specify anything, we have error messages. But on the other hand, if you get rid of everything, including the question mark, then it's okay, because it's not the result of clicking submit. If I only miss one, then it will only complain about that one. So is that okay so far? So we are really just kind of playing with everything that we have learned up to this point, but combining the logic and also the programming constructs in different ways. And that's why programming can be difficult to learn, because you only have so many Lego pieces, right? But the way you can combine the Lego pieces is not countable. And knowing which way to combine the pieces is the right way to solve a particular problem is the magic of programming. That's the part that cannot be explained. Syntax is relatively easy to explain, right? You just have to say, okay, we expect this over here, a semicolon over here. It's fairly straightforward. But when you're looking at how to combine these features, it gets a little bit more complicated. It's really hard for me to explain what goes on upstairs to come up with a solution. Yep?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for being so detailed.
Okay, no problem. Are there any questions about the homework assignment? Let's go back and check the homework assignment description.
Assignment, but number 3.
Number 3.
Which is the boxes.
Checkbox?
Yeah.
Okay, so checkbox is an interesting one, because when you look at the name, what do you notice about the name that is different from all of the other forms? It's a bracket, right? It's the use of the brackets. Okay, very cool. So how do you test this one? Well, let's check it out first. Okay, so the best way to learn is to try it out. Okay, so we say this is checkboxes. Okay. and then we paste, and then we go back and fix the rest of this code. HTML head body, and then we have /body /HTML. Okay, so we got this page. It's called checkboxes. So, oops, yeah. Okay, so we go here and then we change this to checkboxes.php. Okay, very cool, pretty simple. And then we just click plums, watermelon, and apples. Click the submit button. And what we see here in the URL is we have fruit, open bracket and close bracket, appearing several times. So the next question is, when you retrieve fruit from _get, what are you going to get? Right? So that's the next question. So that question can be answered when you just play with the script a little bit and just insert a portion here that is in PHP. So I have one little section of PHP code here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just to say print the entire thing. Print, okay, I'm just going to be crude here and just print, fruit. Do you think the brackets are required?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Okay, this is something that we can actually just try and find out. Okay. So we'll save this file. Go back here, check a few items, click it, and nothing gets printed here. Okay. But we also want to check page source and double check and make sure that nothing is printed there. Okay. So we want to get rid of the brackets and go back and check it again. Oranges and apples. And nothing shows up here either. So the print fruit doesn't do anything. Okay. Okay, fruit is nothing in this case. Fruit is an array. Okay, very good. So that means this is working. This is the correct way to refer to it. Except what I'm getting out of this thing is an array itself.
Right.
Okay, seems to make sense, right?
Yeah.
So with arrays, you have to ask the next question. Is it an associative array where the indexes are strings, or is it a numerical index array, which is a regular array? Okay, all right, very good. So if it is a regular array, how do we know everything that is inside the array? So let's do this.
You assign it to a variable and then you use that for each loop.
Yep. Well, you don't even have to assign it to each thing, because you can do something like this. You can refer to it right away. Now, checking first may be a good idea, because this whole thing, $_get bracket fruit is referring to the array already. It's giving you an array. So next, you just have to say as individual item,
Right.
and in here you just print whatever you want. I mean, you just say I'm just going to print item with a BR. Okay, make it as simple as possible, because I'm just really checking out the variable itself. Okay, so we just click a few things, click it, and see how it prints it out. So this is how you can go through a checkbox array and find out exactly what is checked. Yep. It's all being recorded.
Oh, I know.
I was just making sure you turned back up the microphone on it.
The mic is on, I think.
Okay, because you were trying to.
It'll be too late to fix that now. I cannot go back in time.
Good, okay.
So I think this really helps to answer some of the
I have
questions.
something very similar. It's not working. Look at my code.
It's not working?
If we take
should work. So it's not going through the loop, or the loop is empty.
It doesn't do it.
Oh, I know why.
Why?
Because your get is not all uppercase.
That is something I was trying to play with. So
It is case sensitive.
Yeah.
Variable names are case sensitive.
But isn't it like lowercase, everything lowercase works, right? Yeah.
No, get has to be uppercase because it's a super global variable. That's how it is called.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So is that helping with the checkbox portion of the form's homework assignment? Let's check out what you're supposed to do. Okay, there we go. We go back to the assignment. Okay, write a PHP script that prints, please fill out the form to the screen, when it's not submitted, right? Once the user fills out the form, you'll click all the checkboxes and hit submit. Replace the phrase with the output printed inside an unordered list. Okay, I didn't quite do that part for you guys, but it's pretty trivial to adapt my solution to that. Have the background color on each of the LI tags or elements alternate between green and gold. I think you guys know more about HTML than I do, so you can get this done. This will require an if statement with a modulus.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's like RD1 whatever, so yeah, she's using 2 colors. We did that. And it was like hello world, red and blue.
Well, there are ways to do this without the use of an if statement.
Which one's easier?
And without even counting. Okay, that's a very subjective question.
Okay, so let me rephrase that.
Yep.
Which one is more used in the industry? What is there more of a industry standard for which one we use?
Every programmer thinks they're unique. And
See, I can think of 5 ways of doing the same thing right now, and I cannot tell you which one is supposed to be easier. I can only tell you that they all work. Okay, so but I think you guys know which one is preferred.
Yeah.
You can just do whatever it is you prefer. Okay. Whatever it seems easier to you, use that one. Okay. So you can use a counter, right? You can use a counter, use the modulus operator, compare the remainder of the division to 0, so you can figure out whether it's even or odd. That's one way, right? The other way is to track what is the current color. If the current color is green, change it to gold. If it is gold, change it to green, so it can alternate. That's the other way to do it. Okay. You can also store the 2 colors in an array, right? And then just use sequentially count up, and then use the modulus operator, and use the remainder of the division inside a square bracket, so it will automatically alternate in that case. So there are at least three easy solutions.
Like the binary approach that you use, either that works very well.
Right, but some of these approaches are easier to work with when you have more than 3 colors. So if you have 4 colors and you want to cycle through the 4 colors, one of these approaches is really friendly to that kind of approach. The others are not nearly as friendly. Because if you use the modulus operator, but you use it inside a conditional statement and say that is the remainder of the division 0 or not, that works really well when you only have 2 colors. But when you have 4 colors, then you have 4 branches, right? When the remainder is 0, when the remainder is 1, when the remainder is 2, and the remainder is 3. Because you have to differentiate between all 4 cases when there are 4 colors to consider.
You just don't take the remainder as 0. It's like days of the week, right? So the way you do it, you divide by 7,
yeah.
And then, like the way COBOL does, because I'm a COBOL programmer. You convert a date to January 1, 1601.
Yep.
Okay, and then you divide, you count number of days.
Yep.
You count the days by 7, and then you know, okay, what's the day of the week.
But when you look when you think about storing the colors into an array, and then you do a counter thing, and then you mod the counter with the number of colors in the array, that is very general. Because the moment you add 1 more color to the array, there's nothing you have to change. It will automatically cycle through the 5 colors again and again and again. But if you use the conditional branch approach, and you compare the remainder to 0, 1, 2, 3, now you have to compare it to 4.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you change the size of, every time you change the number of colors, you have to change your code, which is bothersome. I mean, you can do it, it's just really, really tedious. But the other approach, just using the mod inside the square bracket is very easy because it can handle one color all the way up to as many colors as you want. Because when you only have one color, then you're looking at something mod 1, the remainder of division by 1, which is what? Guaranteed to be 0. Then you will go like, yeah, but I could just do this logic without doing the mod, doing the array of colors and stuff like that. Yes, but then if you want to add 2 colors, that it works automatically. The moment you add the 2 colors into the array, the code works. So that's why some approaches to me makes more sense, but it may not be as intuitive because it is not usually how we think. Because we usually think about logic in the sense of if this, do this, if this, do this. So is that kind of answering the question? I didn't really spell out the answer, but I think you guys understood my suggestion. Okay. All right, so let's finish this one. If the user does not fill out the form correctly, have the message, please fill out the form, and then press return. And I think in this case, the only way not to fill out the form correctly is not to click a single of these checkboxes. Because I cannot think of any other way of not filling in the form correctly.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or checking all of them, but there's no reason why you cannot let people check all of them.
No, then she said when I click 4 of them, so it means all of them are not required.
Yep. Oh, so if I pick 4 of the items, the output would be this. Okay. And if you absolutely forgot everything about changing the colors and stuff like that, here. There we go. So if you forgot everything about changing the background color and stuff like that, just copy this code.
Okay.
To change only portions of it into your variables.
Makes sense.
Okay? All right, so let's move on. Generate form, use the following web form on your page. So it's missing a whole bunch of stuff inside the form itself. In the missing area where the radio buttons are supposed to go, write a PHP script that generates a list of radio buttons for each item in this array. And you want each color to have its own radio button. And you need a radio button group to group the whole thing. So if you don't remember how to use a radio button group in the form, what do you do? Yep, HTML form radio button. Oh, that does work. Okay, so that's one.
Which one are you trying to solve now? Number 4 or number 2?
Huh?
Which problem are you attempting?
I think we're pretty close to the end.
So the second assignment is the radio button, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
So you just copy from there and wrap it in.
Yep, there you go. Yep. So are we good with the homework assignment due next week?
Yes.
All right, absolutely. That's good. If there are any questions, just let me know. Use the Canvas method to contact me. I'm getting much better with Canvas now. Instead of not getting instantaneous notification when somebody posts something in a forum, I'm getting instantaneous messages now, so I can respond to those quickly. I just have to configure my account accordingly. All right. Are we good so far?
Just for the checkbox, if you want to keep them, for example, we select some of them, but the form has another portion which need to be done. If the user missed that one, so when it says fill this form, but we don't want to lose the checkboxes which are checked.
Aha, okay, so I see your question. So the question is, if you have a checkbox form and you want to repopulate the checkboxes that have been checked already, what should we do? Okay, that's a good question.
That's an array, right?
Okay, so the way you're asking the question of if we are doing this and we hit the submit query, you want the next load of the page to have these already checked, right?
Yeah, in case of
There's
the-
a
Okay.
set status, so you would just set that, right?
So okay, this is the name, and this is the value. So what you need to do is go back to the form, and okay. So I see
Yes, they
where
have
the
the same
problem
name.
is. Okay, I see where the problem may be. Huh. That is a good question.
Maybe we work on it next day at the beginning of the class. So.
Yeah, I like that. I like the when we go over a portion or a question that most of the class had about the homework.
Okay, so the quickest way I can think of is to check on this one and see what can go inside the element. Okay, so you can have a value representing the value event.
Is that all for today?
Yep, it
Okay.
is. Yep.
The only way that we can check that it comes from a database or
If you set it, if you set the value to what the value is in the checkbox, that means it will be checked.
Okay, if the value attribute was omitted, the submitted data would have a given default value of on. Okay, if a checkbox is unchecked when its form is submitted, there's no value submitted to the server. Okay, that's not what we are interested in. Okay. Okay, so there's the ID versus the value. The ID allows the JavaScript to locate that particular element. The value is what is going to go onto the get request.
I usually end up
because the
checking.
name should be same,
Oh,
but the ID
there we
will
go.
be different.
Checking boxes by default. That's exactly what we're looking for. That.
There you go.
Yep. So if you want the box to be by default checked, just add checked as an attribute.
Yeah, because that's what I was saying. There is a switch. That's where is checked, right? Suppose if you say checked, it will be checked.
Yeah.
Yep. So in the case of this one, in addition to all of these things, each one will have a quote unquote variable that will determine whether you want to submit, whether you want to add the string checked for each of these checkbox elements. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, actually,
Give it a try,
I don't.
so-
I also don't didn't find it.
Oh, you want?
In this form, it's
That was
okay. We can check them all, or we can leave them blank. If there is
Yeah.
another form that has other parts, if the user
In
missed
this
something.
particular assignment, I think you still have to, there's still one condition that you have to check. It's not clear, okay, so you can see right here, if the user does not fill out the form correctly, have the message, please fill out the form return. So you still have to check whether the form is filled correctly or not. But since these are all checkboxes, in most situations with the checkboxes, having all checkboxes left empty is a valid response.
Yeah.
So that means there's no incorrect response when the form only has checkboxes. So that's kind of,
So
I don't know how to
so
interpret that one.
Can you write PHP echo checked inside the input thing,
Yeah.
and then I'll check the thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly how to, handle this, the interpretation of this part. If the user does not fill out the form
Maybe
correctly.
at least not check one of
Or
them
you
and
could
press the submit
You
button.
just concatenate it and just add the.
If you want to consider not checking a single box as incorrect, then it really should be a part of the description here and say check at least one of the following, right? Because if I submit here, not checking anything, you can see the question mark only has my form equals to submit query, but none of these things is in it. But is this a valid response when these are all checkboxes? I would argue that to say that this is a valid response when they're checkboxes. You do okay?
Yep.
All right. So that means It's you guys just interpret it when whichever way you want to.
We assume it has at least one. Because she said like if I collect 4 of them, so it means all of them are not required.
Right.
But also she didn't mention how many of them.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that this might be copied and pasted from the other questions, from the other forms, because you can see this is a statement.
Yeah, on the first form also.
Yeah, so it is always the last statement in every single one, so that might be just an artifact of copy and pasting. So if you don't report, incorrect form, for the checkbox one, I'm not going to take any points off.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's really interesting, and we learned a lot.
I'm not sure whether you're learning anything, but I'm telling what I learned. I'm telling you guys what I know.
For those parts that we missed, we will go back to the
okay,
video.
Glad you like it. Sorry?
Those parts that we missed, so we will go back to the video and watch again.
Right. Well, I think the fact that I'm not very good at HTML really helps. Because I can show you guys where to get the information, and I read the documentation line by line, sentence by sentence, because I'm not familiar with this stuff already. If I were, then I'd just go, okay, use this, use that, and we never really have to go refer to the documentation. And I can tell you, most of the time when I write programs, regardless of the programming language, and also regardless of the application, this is what I do, because I write programs in C, C++, Java for Android programming, for assembly language programming, for Linux system programming, for embedded systems. I cannot remember enough of each context so that I don't have to look up. So every single time I go back to any type of programming, I have to look up. I like Perl programming, but I cannot remember everything about Perl because I get this because all that memory gets displaced when you're learning something else in between, and then 6 months later you have to go back and go like, oh, we have to add something to this script here. Oh, but how do I check the length of an array in Perl? I have no idea. Okay, just Google for it.
So that's the best way that you can use when you use it. That's also a big thing. So still there are lots of codes, but we cannot use them properly. So it needs some time.
Yep. So I think there are several things to programming. One is familiarity with the language itself, which can be acquired just by reading stuff. Okay. Yep. And then the second one is the general approach of how do you specify the logic. Now that is much harder because it comes with experience. Some people get it quickly. Some people do get it kind of a little bit slower. This reminds me. I'm gonna keep recording this one. This reminds me. Look this up if you're interested. It's called the IBM Programmer Aptitude Test. Aptitude Test. And when you search for this, oh, okay, somebody actually has a link here. Yeah, this is the one that I got. These are all bitmaps. Somebody take a photograph of all of these tests. But it's interesting because if IBM has been using this one for decades to evaluate whether someone is going to become a useful productive programmer, and they have been using this for decades, which means it has to be working because IBM is not the kind of company who would fall for fads, right? Oh, this is a fad. IBM doesn't care. IBM only uses things that works. And when you look at this test, it's kind of like an IQ test, like what you're seeing on this page right now. You're seeing a series of numbers, and it's only asking you what is the next one. Okay. There's no word problem. Having mastery of English is not going to help, or their lack of is not going to hurt. Okay, and it has some other pages. Let me look at the pages here. And these ones are not even numbers. Okay, they give you solid circles and squares and partially filled things. It's testing whether you can generalize patterns. Okay, and people who have the quote unquote innate ability to generalize by observing a series of something, a sequence of something, and then be able to generalize and figure out, oh, so the rule of this game is da da da, the next one's going to be this. those people tend to become productive programmers, because remember what programs are supposed to do. What are programs?
Create
Instructions to the computer to perform certain things, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you want to spell out something verbatim, okay, that's not going to be a very good program. So a program is really trying to condense the logic of doing something into something that is small, short, and easy to specify, so they have a program as small as possible to handle as many cases as possible.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's generalization. It is observing the pattern and figure out, oh, this is the pattern. Okay, the moment you notice a pattern, you can turn it into code.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. You know, it's something that's completely optional, but if you are interested, you know, you can go take that test and see, you know, what IBM has to say about, you know, if you feel comfortable with this kind of thing, you know, you might be, you know, a natural programmer. I mean, everybody can be trained to do it, you know, but some people just have the knack to do it.
Just,
Yep.
I do some a little change in the loop assessment. If I save it, is affect my point tonight?
That depends on whether you did it before 6/11 or after 6/11.
I am not I am not saved yet.
Yeah. So if it's a minor change, do not save it.
Because it's not saved. Don't
Okay.
save it. Yeah.
Yeah, or save it under a different name, and so I'm not going to use it for grading purposes.
Okay.
Yep.
just ask.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, good night. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
How do you get to your websites? Like, what was this one? The website? The one, your video.
Oh, the YouTube thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let me write it down. It's YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to go there just to show you what you should see.